Hi, my name is Liam. I am going to tell you a story today. First, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. The story is called The Bonds of the Forest. James and Lala had been inseparable ever since their parents passed away when James was 6 and Lala was just 4. From that moment on, James became both brother. One afternoon, while James was out searching for food, an old woman appeared at their doorstep. She asked Lala for help and suggested that Lala accompany her to the city. Lala, who had never seen the world beyond the trees, hesitated. "Can we wait for my brother?" she asked. But the old woman replied, "If we wait, it will be dark soon." Enticed by the idea of adventure, Lala agreed to go, thinking she would return home before her brother noticed she was gone. When James returned that evening, he found their small home empty. Panic set in as he searched the forest, calling for Lala, but she was nowhere to be found. As night fell, James' heart filled with dread and he cried out, desperate to find his sister. When James returned that evening, he found their small home empty. Panic set in as he searched the forest, calling for Lala, but she was nowhere to be found. As night fell, James' heart filled with dread and he cried out, desperate to find his sister. When James returned that evening, he found their small home empty. Panic set in as he searched the forest, calling for Lala, but she was nowhere to be found. As night fell, James' heart filled with dread and he cried out, desperate to find his sister. When James returned that evening, he found their small home empty. Panic set in as he searched the forest, calling for Lala, but she was nowhere to be found. As night fell, James' heart filled with dread and he cried out, desperate to find his sister. When James returned that evening, he found their small home empty. Panic set in as he searched the forest, calling for Lala, but she was nowhere to be found. As night fell, James' heart filled with dread and he cried out, desperate to find his sister. When James returned that evening, he found their small home empty. Panic set in as he searched the forest, calling for Lala, but she was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Lala was led into the bustling city, amazed by the sights she had never imagined. However, her excitement quickly turned to fear when the old woman sold her to a wealthy man. Unaware of the danger, Lala was treated to a grand meal on her first night and felt special, believing she had found a new life. But the following day, she was forced to work as a servant. Each night, she cried, longing for her brother, but she did not know how to find her way back home. For years, James searched endlessly for Lala. His heart ached with the hope of reuniting with his sister. One day, he found himself in the very city where Lala had been taken. There, he met a beautiful woman from a wealthy family and over time, they fell in love. James had no idea that this woman family was connected to the man who had enslaved his sister. The wealthy man-daughter, who was rude and cruel, especially to the servants, often mistreated Lala without knowing her true identity. As fate would have it, James married the wealthy woman. When they visited her family estate, James was shocked to find Lala working as a servant in the household. Overwhelmed with emotion, Lala and James embraced, tears streaming down their faces as they reunited at last. The rich woman looked on in confusion and asked, "Who is Lala?" James turned to her, his voice steady but full of emotion. "She is my sister, the one I have been searching for all these years." The rich woman, however, did not welcome this revelation. Though she acted kind when James was around, her attitude toward Lala became even crueler. She forced Lala to work long hours, denying her food if tasks were not completed perfectly. Lala, not wanting to come between her brother and his new wife, kept silent, enduring the mistreatment in secret. When James was home, his wife would treat Lala like royalty. But one day, James returned unexpectedly and saw his wife cruelly berating Lala. Furious, James confronted her and, in a storm of emotion, left her, taking Lala back to their peaceful forest home. Months passed, and the siblings lived happily in their forest, free from the cruelty of the city. But one day, the rich woman discovered she was pregnant with James' child. Determined to win him back, She publicly announced a reward for anyone who could find James. Eventually, the same old woman who had once taken Lala away appeared at the rich woman's doorstep. "I know where your husband is," she said. Following the old woman's directions, the rich lady ventured deep into the forest until she finally arrived at James and Lala's home. When Lala saw her, fear gripped her heart. James, filled with anger, immediately demanded, "What are you doing here? We're over." The rich woman, however, feigned an apology. "James, I am pregnant with your baby," she said softly. "I do not want our child to grow up without a father like you did. I want us to be a family." James was shocked. For a moment, his heart softened at the thought of becoming a father. But he turned to his sister for guidance. Lala, with a gentle smile, said, "I forgive her, James. You should be with your child. I will be happy knowing my niece or nephew will have a father." Torn but relieved by his sister's support, James embraced Lala. The rich woman asked, "Come with us, Lala. Be part of our family." But Lala shook her head. "No, I belong here in the forest. This is my home, where I feel free. You go, live your life, and I will be happy here." With a heavy heart, James left with his wife, who now carried his child. Lala remained behind, at peace in the quiet woods she loved. Though they were apart, Lala and James remained bound by the love they had shared since childhood, a bond that nothing could ever break. James visited Lala frequently, but his wife grew resentful. She hated the bond between James and his sister, and the more time James spent with Lala, the more her jealousy festered. After giving birth to a baby girl, James was overjoyed. He adored his new family and thought that his wife had changed for the better. But the darkness in her heart only grew, and she began to scheme against Lala. One day, the rich woman hired a man to do the unthinkable, kill Lala, believing that without her, James would never leave her side again. The plan was set into motion, and the man ventured into the forest, searching for Lala. But as fate would have it, the hired man could not bring himself to do it. The peace of the forest and the purity of Lala's spirit weighed heavily on him. He returned to the rich woman, confessing his failure and warning her of the consequences of such cruelty. Unfazed, the rich woman swore she would find another way to rid herself of Lala, blind to the darkness growing within her own heart.